Little boy ran. To the veteran single dad crying, "They took my sister." What he did next melted hearts. But when that battle-scarred dad stormed into the stormy night to save her, no one knew it wasn't just a rescue. It was the moment a broken soldier found the family he never knew he was fighting for. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Jack Walker's backyard as he methodically hammered another nail into the worn fence post. The steady rhythm of his work matched the gentle gospel tune floating from the old radio perched on his tool bench. A warm breeze carried the scent of approaching rain and freshly cut grass. "Come on, buddy. Get the ball." Lila's clear voice rang out as she tossed a tennis ball across the yard. The golden retriever bounded after it, his tail wagging with pure joy. Jack paused his work to watch them, a small smile tugging at his lips. These quiet moments still carried an edge of sadness. Emily would have loved days like this. The simple piece of yard work and Lila's laughter. 3 years had passed since cancer took her, but some days the absence felt as fresh as yesterday. "Dad, look!" Lila called out. "Buddy learned a new trick!" The dog sat perfectly still, balancing the tennis ball on his nose, until Lila gave a quick hand signal. With a gentle toss of his head, Buddy flipped the ball into the air and caught it. "That's pretty impressive, sweetheart," Jack said, his voice warm with pride. "Your mom always said Buddy was the smartest dog in Tennessee." A shadow crossed Lila's face at the mention of her mother, but she quickly brightened again. "Can we go to May's Diner for lunch, please?" Jack glanced at his unfinished fence work, then back at his daughter's hopeful expression. "All right," he agreed, setting down his hammer. "Let me clean up first." May's Diner sat at the heart of Willow Creek. Its red-checkered curtains and neon sign a familiar sight to everyone in town. The bell above the door chimed as Jack and Lila entered, the aroma of coffee and fresh-baked pie wrapping around them like a warm blanket. "Jack Walker, as I live and breathe," Pastor Joe's familiar voice called out from his usual corner booth. The older man's face creased with genuine pleasure at seeing them. Jack nodded politely, steering Lila toward an empty table. But Pastor Joe was already making his way over, his well-worn Bible tucked under one arm. "We've missed you at Sunday service," the pastor said gently, no judgment in his tone. "The choir's not quite the same without Emily's voice, but there's always room for you both." Jack's jaw tightened slightly. "Maybe sometime soon, Pastor. We're still." He glanced at Lila, who was studying the menu with careful concentration. "We're still finding our way." Pastor Joe's eyes softened with understanding. "Of course, son. The Lord's house is always open when you're ready." He squeezed Jack's shoulder before heading back to his booth. After lunch, Jack stopped at Thompson's Grocery for dinner supplies. The store's fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he filled his cart with the basics: chicken, vegetables, pasta. Emily had been the creative cook in the family. These days, he stuck to simple meals that Lila would eat without complaint. Dark clouds were gathering as he pulled into his driveway, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Thunder rumbled in the distance as he and Lila carried the grocery bags inside. "Looks like a big storm coming," he observed, helping Lila put away the food. "Better bring Buddy in soon." The first fat drops of rain began to fall as Jack returned to the backyard to gather his tools. Buddy barked once, sharply, his ears perking up at some distant sound. The radio still played softly, the gospel music now underscored by the growing storm. Lightning flashed, illuminating the yard in stark white. In that brief moment, Jack caught movement at the gate. Rapid, desperate footsteps approaching. His military instincts kicked in immediately, body tensing as he turned toward the sound. The gate burst open with a bang that was almost lost in the thunder. A small boy stumbled through, soaked to the skin, and sobbing. His clothes were dirty and torn, his dark hair plastered to his forehead by the rain. Terror radiated from every line of his small body. "They took my sister!" The boy's voice cracked with fear and exhaustion. "Please, please help. Nobody else would listen." Jack dropped his hammer, moving quickly to kneel before the frightened child. Rain poured down around them as another flash of lightning split the sky. The boy couldn't have been more than 7 years old, and his whole body trembled, from cold, fear, or both. "Slow down, son," Jack said, keeping his voice steady and calm despite the urgency in his chest. "Who took your sister? When did this happen?" "2 men. In a truck," the boy choked out between sobs. "They grabbed Mia, just now, at the edge of town." His small hands clutched at Jack's shirt. "Everyone said I was lying, said I'm just a troublemaker. But I'm not lying. Please, you have to help her." Buddy had moved closer, whining softly and pressing against the boy's side. The dog's usual playful demeanor was replaced with protective concern, his warm presence seeming to offer some comfort to the distraught child. Thunder crashed overhead as Jack studied the boy's face. In those wide, frightened eyes, he saw something that struck deep into his heart. The pure trust of a child who had run out of options, who had somehow found his way to Jack's gate in desperate hope of finding help. Thunder cracked overhead as Jack guided the shivering boy through his kitchen door. Raindrops pelted the windows while Lila hurried to grab a thick blanket from the living room closet. "Here, sit down," Jack said softly, helping Ethan onto the worn leather couch. The boy's clothes were soaked through, his small frame trembling. Jack wrapped the blanket around his shoulders while Lila hovered nearby, her blue eyes wide with concern. "I'll get some hot chocolate," she whispered, already heading for the kitchen. Jack nodded, grateful for his daughter's intuitive kindness. "Take deep breaths," Jack instructed, kneeling in front of Ethan. The boy's teeth chattered, whether from cold or fear, Jack couldn't tell. "Can you tell me what happened?" Ethan's words came out in broken gasps. "My sister, Mia, we were at the park." He clutched the blanket tighter. "The gray truck! They grabbed her!" Lila returned with a steaming mug, careful as she handed it to Ethan. The boy's hands shook so badly that Jack had to help him hold it. "How long ago was this?" Jack asked, keeping his voice steady despite the alarm rising in his chest. "Just now. I ran." Ethan's lower lip quivered. "Nobody would help. They said we're just trouble. But Mia." Fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. Jack's jaw tightened. He knew how some folks in town viewed the foster kids, with suspicion and judgment rather than compassion. Standing up, he reached for the phone on the side table. "I'm calling someone who can help," he assured Ethan. His fingers punched in a familiar number. After 2 rings, a gruff voice answered. "Garrison here. Tom, it's Jack Walker. We've got a situation." Jack kept his voice low but urgent. "A young girl's been taken near the park. Gray pickup truck. Her brother's here with me now." There was a brief pause. "Details, Jack. Everything you've got." As Jack relayed what he knew, he watched Ethan sip the hot chocolate, Lila sitting close beside him. The boy's breathing had steadied somewhat, though fear still haunted his eyes. "I'm sending units out now," Tom said. "Stay put until—" "I'm going to drive around," Jack cut in. "The creek road, maybe. In this rain, a truck might leave tracks." "Jack," Tom's warning tone was clear. "You're not in the service anymore. Just going to look, Tom, that's all." Jack's voice left no room for argument. "Call my cell if you need me." He hung up and turned to Lila, who was already standing. "Dad, I want to come too." "No, sweetheart." Jack shook his head firmly. "I need you to stay here with Ethan. Keep him warm and safe. Can you do that for me?" Lila's face fell, but she nodded bravely. "Promise you'll be careful?" "Promise." Jack squeezed her shoulder. "I'll be back soon." He grabbed his heavy flashlight from the kitchen drawer and his old army jacket from the hook by the door. The familiar weight of it settled on his shoulders like armor. "Ethan," he said gently, "I'm going to find your sister. You're safe here with Lila, okay?" The boy nodded, clutching his mug like a lifeline. "Please find her," he whispered. The rain had intensified when Jack stepped outside, but he barely noticed it as he climbed into his truck. The engine roared to life, headlights cutting through the growing darkness. His mind shifted into a familiar state of focused calm, the same one that had served him well in combat. He drove slowly past the park first, scanning the muddy ground for tire marks. Nothing distinct enough to follow, but he knew these roads, knew where someone might go to stay hidden. The creek road was barely more than a dirt track, winding through dense trees before connecting to the highway. Jack turned onto it, wipers working overtime against the downpour. His headlights caught something in the mud, fresh tracks, deep and wide, the kind a pickup might leave. He followed them carefully, every sense alert. The tracks weaved erratically, as if the driver was unfamiliar with the road's sharp turns. Around one bend, Jack's lights illuminated something ahead, the dull gray shape of a truck, its front end buried in the drainage ditch. Jack pulled over, leaving his engine running. The beam of his flashlight cut through the rain as he approached on foot, moving with the caution born from years of training. The truck's windows were fogged up, making it impossible to see inside. "Mia?" he called out, loud enough to carry over the storm. "Mia, are you there?" Thunder rumbled in the distance as Jack approached the abandoned truck, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. His military training kicked in. Careful, measured steps, senses alert for any movement. The gray pickup sat tilted in the muddy ditch, its driver's door hanging open. "Hello?" Jack called out, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Anyone there?" A muffled whimper came from inside the truck. Jack's heart pounded as he reached for the passenger door, pulling it open slowly. The beam of his flashlight revealed a girl huddled beneath a torn blanket, her dark eyes wide with fear. "It's okay," Jack said softly, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm here to help. Your brother Ethan sent me." At the mention of her brother's name, the girl's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Ethan's okay?" Her voice quivered. "He's safe at my house," Jack assured her, offering his hand. "I'm Jack Walker. Let's get you out of here." Mia hesitated for just a moment before grabbing his hand. She scrambled out of the truck, her clothes damp and muddy. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You're safe now," Jack said, draping his jacket around her shoulders. She was tall for 12, but painfully thin, her dark hair tangled from the struggle. She clung to his arm as they walked to his truck. Red and blue lights flashed through the trees as Sheriff Tom's patrol car pulled up. The gruff lawman stepped out, adjusting his rain-slicked hat. "Jack, you found her?" "She was in the truck," Jack explained, helping Mia into the passenger seat of his vehicle. "The men are gone." Tom's weathered face grew serious as he surveyed the scene. "Description of the suspects?" "2 men," Mia said quietly. "One had a beard. They wore dark clothes. The truck smelled like cigarettes." Tom nodded, jotting notes in his small pad. "We'll put out an alert. Looks like they headed toward the state line." He placed a gentle hand on Mia's shoulder. "You're safe now, young lady. Mr. Walker here is one of the good ones." Jack drove carefully through the rain-slicked streets, stealing glances at Mia. She sat rigid, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Your brother's been really worried," he said softly. "He's smart," Mia replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "He knows to find help when things get bad." The porch light of Jack's house cut through the darkness as they pulled up. Before the truck could fully stop, the front door flew open. Ethan burst out, Lila close behind him. "Mia!" Ethan cried, his small feet splashing through puddles as he ran to meet them. The moment Jack helped Mia out of the truck, Ethan crashed into her, wrapping his arms around her waist. She dropped to her knees in the wet grass, pulling him close. "I'm here, buddy," she whispered, running her fingers through his hair. "I'm okay." Jack watched the reunion, something tightening in his chest. The way they clung to each other spoke of a bond forged by hardship, 2 souls against the world. Lila appeared at his side, slipping her small hand into his. Sheriff Tom's car pulled up, and he stepped out with a heavy sigh. "Called it in. State police are setting up checkpoints, but those men are probably long gone." He lowered his voice. "Jack, there's something else. These kids, they're in the system. Their foster home's been under investigation." Jack nodded slowly, watching as Mia whispered reassurances to her brother. The pieces were falling into place. Their worn clothes, the wariness in their eyes, the way they held each other like they were all they had in the world. "Let's get everyone inside," Jack suggested. It's been a long night. In the warm light of his living room, the children began to settle. Lila brought hot chocolate, carefully carrying the mugs on a tray, like she'd seen her mother do years ago. Mia accepted hers with a quiet, "Thank you, sir." That made Jack's heart ache. Word spread quickly through Willow Creek, as it always did. Jack's phone buzzed with messages from neighbors offering help. Pastor Joe called to make sure everyone was all right. Even Mrs. Peterson from the diner dropped off a casserole, her usual stern expression softened with concern. Sheriff Tom handled the official statements, his presence steady and reassuring. "We'll figure this out," he promised, patting Jack's shoulder before leaving. "You did good today, Walker." As the night wore on, the storm began to fade. Ethan fought sleep, his head nodding even as he tried to keep his eyes on his sister. Eventually, exhaustion won out. He curled up on the couch, still holding Mia's hand. Jack stood in the doorway, watching the sleeping boy. The radio played softly in the kitchen, an old country song about finding home. Something stirred in his heart, something he hadn't felt since Emily passed. It wasn't just sympathy or duty that made him act tonight. It was something deeper, something that felt like purpose. Mia sat vigilant beside her brother, her eyes heavy but determined to stay open. She looked up at Jack, and for a moment, he saw past her careful walls to the frightened child beneath. "Thank you for helping us, sir," she whispered. The rain had softened to a gentle patter, mixing with the quiet music from the kitchen. Peace settled over the house like a warm blanket, wrapping around them all in the aftermath of chaos. Warm sunlight poured through the kitchen window of Jack Walker's modest farmhouse, casting a golden glow across the worn wooden table. The smell of butter and maple syrup filled the air as Lila, wearing her favorite pink apron, carefully carried a plate stacked with fresh pancakes. "Here you go," she announced cheerfully, setting them down between Ethan and Mia. The Cole siblings sat straight-backed in their chairs, hands folded in their laps. Their eyes darted between the steaming pancakes and Jack, who was leaning against the counter with his coffee mug. Neither child reached for the food. "Go ahead," Jack said softly. "Lila makes the best pancakes in Tennessee." Mia's thin fingers slowly picked up her fork. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, cutting a tiny piece. Ethan followed his sister's lead, his shoulders still tense. Jack's heart ached, watching them eat with such careful restraint. These weren't children enjoying breakfast. These were kids who didn't know if this meal might be their last here. "Would you like some more milk?" Lila asked, already reaching for the pitcher. Her natural warmth seemed to ease some of the tension, especially when she sat down next to Mia with her own plate. "These are really good," Mia admitted after a few bites, offering Lila a small smile. Jack set his coffee down and picked up the kitchen phone. "I need to make a call," he said gently. "You kids keep eating." He dialed the number for child services, which he'd gotten from Sheriff Tom the night before. After 2 rings, a warm voice answered. "This is Miss Darlene Hayes." "Ma'am, this is Jack Walker. I'm calling about Ethan and Mia Cole." "Oh, thank heavens." Miss Darlene's relief was evident. "Sheriff Garrison left me a message about what happened yesterday. Are they all right?" "Yes, ma'am. They're having breakfast right now. Safe and sound." "Bless your heart for taking them in, Mr. Walker. But," she paused, her tone growing serious, "there's something you should know. Their foster placement, the Hendersons, they've been under investigation for neglect. We were actually planning to remove the children this week." Jack's grip tightened on the phone. He glanced at the kitchen table, where Ethan was now giggling at funny faces Lila was making. "What happens to them now?" he asked quietly. "Well," Miss Darlene sighed, "finding a placement that will take both children together. It's challenging. They might have to go to separate homes temporarily." "Separate them?" Jack's voice came out sharper than he intended. In the kitchen, both Cole siblings froze, their forks stopping midair. Mia's face went pale. She reached for Ethan's hand under the table. "No, please," she whispered, though Jack wasn't sure if she was talking to him or praying. "Don't let them split us up." Jack covered the phone's receiver with his hand. "It's okay," he assured them quickly. "Nobody's going anywhere right now." Into the phone, he said, "Miss Darlene, could you give me some time? Let them stay here while things get sorted out." "You'd need temporary guardian certification," she replied. "But given the circumstances, I could push the paperwork through quickly. You have a clean record, a stable home." "Then do it," Jack said firmly. "I promised these kids they'd be safe here." After finishing the call and getting details about the required paperwork, Jack returned to the table. Lila had managed to coax small smiles back onto the siblings' faces by arranging their remaining pancake pieces into silly faces with fruit. "Listen up, you two," Jack said, pulling up a chair. "You're welcome to stay here while Miss Darlene sorts everything out. Nobody's separating anybody, okay?" Ethan's bottom lip trembled. "Promise?" "I promise, buddy." The rest of the morning flowed more easily after that. As Jack worked in the yard, fixing a loose shutter, he noticed Ethan trailing behind him like a small shadow. The boy didn't say much, but his eyes followed Jack's every move. "Want to hold the hammer?" Jack offered. Ethan nodded eagerly, his small hands wrapping around the tool's handle. Jack guided him through tapping in a nail, and the boy's face lit up with pride when it went in straight. Inside, the sounds of giggling drifted from the kitchen. Jack peeked through the window to see Lila showing Mia how to mix cookie dough. Flour dusted both girls' faces, and Mia's usual guardedness had softened as she helped Lila measure ingredients. "My mom taught me this recipe," Lila was saying. "She said cookies always make people feel better." "They smell really good," Mia replied, carefully dropping spoonfuls onto a baking sheet. Later, as dusk painted the sky in soft purples, Jack went through his normal bedtime routine with Lila. She sat cross-legged on her bed, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit while he checked under the bed for monsters, a ritual they'd kept, even though she was too old for it now. "Dad?" she asked as he pulled her covers up. "Yeah, sweetheart? Can't we keep them?" Jack's heart squeezed in his chest. He looked at his daughter's hopeful face, remembering how quickly she'd opened her heart to their unexpected guests. "It's not that simple, honey," he said softly, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. The morning sun had barely risen when the first news van pulled up outside Jack's house. He watched from behind the curtains as reporters gathered on his front lawn, their cameras and microphones ready. The sight made his stomach tighten. "Mr. Walker!" they called out. "Can we get a statement about your heroic rescue?" Jack stepped away from the window, shaking his head. In the kitchen, Ethan and Mia sat at the table, still in their borrowed pajamas, watching him with worried eyes. "It's okay," he assured them, though his own voice felt strained. "They'll get tired and leave soon." Lila bounded down the stairs, her eyes wide with excitement. "Dad, we're on TV! They're calling you the hero vet of Willow Creek!" Jack winced at the title. He'd done what anyone would do, what he had to do. Nothing heroic about it. The doorbell rang again, making Ethan jump in his chair. "Finish your breakfast," Jack said quietly. "I'll handle this." He opened the front door just enough to speak through the gap. "Please respect our privacy. The children have been through enough." A reporter thrust a microphone forward. "Mr. Walker, how does it feel to be a hero?" "I'm not," he said firmly, then closed the door despite their continued questions. When he returned to the kitchen, he found Ethan standing beside his chair, small fingers fidgeting with the hem of his oversized t-shirt. "Mr. Jack?" The boy's voice trembled slightly. "Are they going to make us leave?" Jack's heart clenched. He knelt down to Ethan's level, meeting those trust-filled eyes. "Why don't you tell me about your family, buddy?" Ethan glanced at Mia, who nodded slightly. "We don't got any," he said softly. "Mom died when I was real little. Don't remember her much. Dad left before that." Mia spoke up, her voice steady but tired. "We've been in 6 different homes since then. The last one." She trailed off, looking down at her untouched toast. Jack felt something inside him crack. 6 homes. These kids were just looking for somewhere to belong. A knock at the back door made them all turn. Miss Darlene stood there, her kind face drawn with concern. Jack led her in through the kitchen entrance, away from the reporters out front. "I brought coffee," she said, holding up a carrier with 4 cups. "Thought we might need it." She set her briefcase on the counter and pulled out a stack of papers. "Jack, we need to talk." The children tensed, and Jack saw Mia's hand reach for her brother's under the table. "The foster home's license has been revoked," Miss Darlene explained, her voice gentle but professional. "Given the circumstances, we need to place Ethan and Mia in new homes immediately." "Together?" Jack asked, though he could read the answer in her expression. "We'll try, but—" She hesitated. "The closest available home that could take both of them is 3 counties away. Otherwise, we're looking at separate placements." "No!" Ethan cried out, jumping from his chair. "Please don't split us up." He ran to his sister, wrapping his arms around her waist. Jack watched them cling to each other, and something shifted in his chest. Before he could stop himself, he heard his own voice saying, "What about temporary custody?" Miss Darlene's eyebrows rose. "Jack, that's a complicated process. There are home studies, background checks, training courses." Another knock came from the back door. Sheriff Tom stood there, his badge glinting in the morning sunday. Jack let him in, grateful for the familiar face. "Saw the media circus out front," Tom said, nodding toward the house's other side. "Thought you might need backup." "Tom," Jack said, "what's involved in getting temporary custody?" The sheriff's weathered face softened as he looked at the children, then back at his old friend. "You've got the heart, Jack, but it'll take faith and patience. Lots of both." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of paperwork and conversations. Miss Darlene promised to start the process, but explained she'd still need to place the children temporarily while everything was processed. As the day faded into evening, Jack found himself standing in his bedroom, unable to sleep. Moonlight spilled across Emily's photo on his dresser. Her smile, frozen in time, seemed to hold all the answers he couldn't find. "What would you do, Em?" he whispered, touching the frame gently. From down the hall he could hear soft whispers from the guest room where Ethan and Mia slept. He walked quietly to their door, left slightly ajar at Ethan's request. The boy lay curled against his sister, both finally peaceful in sleep. Jack stood there, watching their gentle breathing, and felt the answers settle in his heart. Emily would have already opened their home without hesitation. She would have known, just as he now knew, that some things were worth fighting for. The county office building loomed gray and imposing against the morning sky. Jack Walker straightened his tie one last time before stepping through the heavy glass doors. The waiting room inside felt cramped and stuffy, filled with rows of hard plastic chairs and the quiet murmur of worried conversations. Jack found an empty seat between a young mother bouncing a fussy baby and an elderly man clutching a stack of wrinkled papers. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a harsh glow that made everyone look tired. A wall clock ticked away minutes that felt like hours. "Number 47, called a bored voice from behind the counter. Jack glanced at his paper slip. 62. He settled deeper into the uncomfortable chair, remembering Ethan and Mia's faces when he'd left that morning. They'd looked so scared, even with Lila promising to show them how to make her special chocolate chip cookies. "You sure about this, Dad?" Lila had asked as he headed out, her eyes wise beyond her 10 years. 2 hours crawled by. Jack watched people come and go, each with their own stories of need or hope or desperation. He thought about his military service, how waiting had been part of that life too. But this wait felt different, more important somehow. Number 62, Jack stood, his knees cracking slightly. The clerk directed him to office 2B, where Miss Porter waited. She was a thin woman with steel-rimmed glasses and perfectly styled gray hair. Her desk was immaculate, with files arranged in precise stacks. "Mr. Walker," she said, not looking up from her computer screen. "You're applying for temporary guardianship of Ethan and Mia Sanders?" "Yes, ma'am." She finally looked at him, her eyes sharp and assessing. "You're a single father? And a veteran?" "Yes, Gulf War medic. I've owned my home for 15 years, run my own handyman business." "Mr. Walker." Miss Porter folded her hands on the desk. "These children have experienced significant trauma. Their needs are complex. What makes you think you're qualified to handle this situation?" Jack sat straighter, keeping his voice steady. "Ma'am, I've treated wounded soldiers under fire. I've raised my daughter alone since my wife passed. I know about trauma, about healing. Those kids need stability and safety. I can provide that. And your own trauma? Your service record mentions PTSD. I've been in therapy. Still go sometimes. It's taught me a lot about coping, about helping others cope too." Jack pulled out letters from his folder. "I have references from Pastor Joe Matthews, Sheriff Tom Garrison, my daughter's teachers." Miss Porter accepted the papers with a slight frown. "Community support is good, but raising traumatized children requires more than good intentions." "I understand that. But right now, those kids need someone who won't give up on them. They need consistency, patience, and love. I can give them that." The questioning continued for another hour. Miss Porter probed every aspect of his life. His income, his home, his support system. Jack answered honestly, fighting to keep his growing frustration in check. Finally, she set down her pen. "The investigation process typically takes 4 to 6 weeks. We'll need home visits, background checks, character references." She paused, studying him. "However, given the circumstances and Sheriff Garrison's recommendation, the children can remain in your temporary care during the evaluation period." Relief flooded through Jack. "Thank you, ma'am." "Don't thank me yet, Mr. Walker. This is just the beginning. You'll need to attend parenting classes, schedule regular check-ins, and the children must start counseling." Jack nodded, accepting the thick stack of forms she handed him. His hand cramped as he signed paper after paper, but he didn't complain. Each signature was a step closer to keeping Ethan and Mia safe. The sun was setting by the time Jack pulled into his driveway. The house smelled of cookies and childhood laughter echoed from the kitchen. He found flour-dusted handprints on the counter and 3 grinning, messy faces. "Dad!" Lila called out. "Look what we made!" But it wasn't just the cookies they were excited about. Ethan and Mia stood nervously beside a large piece of construction paper. They'd drawn a house, his house, with 4 stick figures standing in front. Our family was written across the top in wobbly letters. "We used all the colors," Ethan said proudly, pointing to the rainbow arching over the house. Mia twisted her hands together. "Is it okay that we made it?" Jack's throat tightened as he studied the drawing. The stick figure, meant to be him, was extra tall, wearing what looked like a cape. Lila stood next to him, her yellow hair sticking straight out. Ethan and Mia had drawn themselves holding hands beside them. "It's perfect," he managed to say. "This is going right on the fridge." In the kitchen, Jack found a magnet and carefully hung the drawing. Next to it was a faded photograph of Emily, her smile bright and loving. For a moment he just stood there, looking at both images, past and present, loss and new beginnings. His eyes grew wet, but for the first time in years they weren't tears of sadness alone. The morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows of the Walker home, painting everything in a warm, golden glow. The sound of spoons clinking against cereal bowls and children's chatter filled the air. It had been a week since Jack started the custody process, and already their morning routine felt natural, as if it had always been this way. "Don't forget your science project, Lila," Jack reminded, pouring himself a second cup of coffee. He watched as Mia helped Ethan tie his shoelaces, her patience showing in her gentle instructions. "Over, under, and through," Mia said softly, guiding Ethan's small fingers. "You're getting better at this." Ethan beamed at the praise, his stutter less pronounced when he replied, "Thanks, Mia." Lila bounded down the stairs with her backpack and a poster board covered in pictures of the solar system. "Got it, Dad." And I helped Ethan pack his lunch. Jack's heart swelled at how quickly the children had bonded. Even Mia, who had been so guarded at first, was starting to show her true colors, smart, caring, and protective of the others. The walk to school had become Jack's favorite part of the day. The autumn air was crisp, and fallen leaves crunched beneath their feet as they made their way down the quiet streets of Willow Creek. Lila and Ethan played their usual game of jumping over cracks in the sidewalk, while Mia walked beside Jack, carrying her books close to her chest. "Mr. Walker," Mia said quietly, "thank you for signing my permission slip for the field trip." Jack smiled down at her. "Of course, the Science Museum sounds exciting. At the school gates, Mrs. Thompson, Ethan's teacher, waved them over. "Mr. Walker, I wanted to tell you, Ethan's doing wonderfully. His reading has improved so much this week." Ethan ducked his head shyly, but Jack could see his proud smile. "And Mia," Mrs. Burton added, approaching from the playground, "your essay was excellent. Top marks." After saying goodbye to the children, Jack headed to the Veterans and Families Outreach Program building. The old brick structure had become a second home over the past few days. Inside, he found Tom, his old army buddy, setting up chairs for the morning meeting. "Jack, just in time," Tom called out. "We've got some new families coming in today." Jack rolled up his sleeves and helped arrange the room. As other veterans and their families began arriving, he felt a familiar sense of purpose settling over him. Here, his experiences, even the painful ones, could help others. When a young veteran spoke about struggling to connect with his kids after deployment, Jack shared his own journey of learning to be present again. "Some days are harder than others," Jack admitted to the group, "but my daughter taught me that being there, really there, matters more than being perfect." The afternoon passed quickly, and soon it was time to pick up the kids. The walk home was filled with stories about their day. Lila's art project, Mia's perfect spelling test, and Ethan's breakthrough in reading group. After dinner, Jack sat with Ethan at the kitchen table, working through math problems. The boy's forehead wrinkled in concentration as he counted on his fingers. 7 plus 5, Ethan muttered. "Remember what we talked about?" Jack prompted gently. "Start with the bigger number in your head. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Ethan's face lit up. "I did it!" "That you did, buddy." Jack ruffled his hair. "You know, this reminds me of when I was in the Army, teaching new medics how to count supplies quickly." "Tell us a story, please?" Lila called from the living room, where she and Mia were reading. Jack leaned back in his chair, choosing his words carefully. "Well, there was this one time in Saudi Arabia when we had to count all our medical supplies in the dark because the power was out. We used flashlights, and ended up counting everything 3 times because Johnson kept getting distracted by desert lizards running across his boots. The children giggled, and Jack continued with more lighthearted tales, carefully avoiding the darker memories that sometimes haunted his dreams. Later that night, after helping Mia with her history homework and listening to Lila practice her reading, it was time for bed. "Sweet dreams, sweetheart," he said, tucking Lila in. In Mia and Ethan's room, he found Ethan already half asleep. "Good night, buddy." He turned to Mia, who was arranging her books for the next day. "Sleep well, Mia." "Good night, Jack," she replied, testing out his first name with a small smile. That night, like many others, Jack woke with a start, his heart racing from dreams of desert heat and exploding shells. But instead of the empty silence that used to greet him, he heard the peaceful breathing of 3 children down the hall. He got up quietly and walked to the porch, letting the cool night air calm his nerves. Fireflies danced in the yard, their gentle light blinking like stars brought down to earth. Jack watched them, remembering how Emily used to love these quiet moments. The ache of missing her was still there, but it felt different now, less sharp, more bittersweet. Looking up at the star-filled sky, Jack whispered, "Maybe this is what healing looks like." The breakfast crowd at Sally's diner buzzed with conversation, coffee cups clinking against saucers. Jack sat alone at the counter, picking at his scrambled eggs while snippets of whispered discussions floated around him. "Did you hear about those foster kids staying with Jack Walker?" Mrs. Peterson's voice carried from a nearby booth. "That poor man," someone replied. "He can barely take care of himself, let alone 2 more children." Jack's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He'd gotten used to being the subject of town gossip since Emily passed, but this was different. These whispers weren't about his grief anymore, they were about his ability to be a father. "I think it's wonderful," Sally chimed in as she refilled his coffee cup, loud enough for others to hear. Her gray hair was pulled back in its usual neat bun, her kind eyes meeting Jack's. "Those children need someone with a good heart." "Morning, Jack." Pastor Joe's familiar voice cut through the murmurs as he settled onto the stool next to him. "Don't let the chatter get to you. Small towns run on gossip like cars run on gas." Jack managed a small smile. "Some days it's harder to ignore than others." Before Pastor Joe could respond, the diner's bell chimed. Miss Porter walked in, her clipboard tucked under her arm. Jack's stomach tightened as she spotted him and made her way over. "Mr. Walker," she said, all business. "I'd like to do an unannounced home visit this morning if you're available." Jack nodded, reaching for his wallet. "Of course. Let me just settle up here." The drive home was quiet, Miss Porter's presence filling his truck with unspoken judgment. When they arrived, the house was empty. Lila had taken Ethan and Mia to the park down the street. Miss Porter's heels clicked against the hardwood floors as she inspected each room, making notes on her clipboard. In the kitchen, she paused by the medicine cabinet Jack had left open that morning. "These are prescription medications?" she asked, eyeing the orange bottle. "Yes, ma'am. For PTSD, from my time overseas." Jack's voice was steady, but his hands clenched at his sides. She made another note. "And how do you manage your symptoms around the children?" "I've been in therapy for years. The medications help. I've never had an episode that put anyone at risk." Miss Porter's pen scratched against paper. "Nevertheless, it's a concern that needs to be noted." After she left, Jack sat heavily on the porch steps, the weight of judgment pressed down on his shoulders until Pastor Joe's pickup truck pulled into the driveway. "Saw Miss Porter leaving," Pastor Joe said, settling beside him. "Thought you might need a friendly ear." Jack ran a hand over his face. "She saw my medications, the way she looked at me, like I was a bomb waiting to go off." "The Lord doesn't make mistakes, Jack," Pastor Joe said quietly. "He wouldn't bring those children into your life just to take them away. Sometimes the biggest tests of faith come right before the biggest blessings." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of running feet. Ethan burst through the gate, tears streaming down his face. Behind him, Lila and Mia hurried to catch up. "They said you're crazy," Ethan sobbed, throwing himself into Jack's arms. "At the park, some ladies, they said you're not right in the head and they'll take us away again." Jack's heart clenched as he held the trembling boy. Lila and Mia stood nearby, their faces worried. Pastor Joe quietly excused himself, giving Jack's shoulder a supportive squeeze as he left. "Listen to me, buddy," Jack said, pulling back to look Ethan in the eye. "Sometimes people say mean things because they don't understand. But I promise you, you're safe here. All of you." "But what if they make us leave?" Ethan's voice was small, his hands clutching Jack's shirt. "Then we'll fight it together." Jack gathered all 3 children into a hug. "That's what families do." Later that night, the living room echoed with laughter. They sat around the coffee table playing Monopoly, pizza boxes empty beside them. Ethan had somehow managed to collect all the railroads, while Mia was building hotels with the shrewd planning of a future businesswoman. Lila kept landing on their properties, dramatically declaring bankruptcy each time. Jack leaned back in his armchair, watching them negotiate trades and count colorful money. The worry from earlier still lingered at the edges of his mind, but it was pushed aside by something stronger, something that felt a lot like love. Ethan's giggles filled the room as Lila landed on his railroad again. Mia helped him count out the rent money, their heads bent together over the board. The sight made Jack's chest tighten with emotion. These moments, these simple, precious moments, were healing something in all of them. Where there had been emptiness, now there was fullness. Where there had been silence, now there was laughter. Where there had been fear, love was slowly taking root. "Dad, it's your turn," Lila called, shaking the dice at him. Jack leaned forward, grinning. All right, but I warn you, I'm feeling lucky." The game continued, their joy filling every corner of the house that had once felt too big, too quiet. Outside, crickets chirped their evening song, and the Tennessee stars twinkled above their home, their sanctuary, where 4 healing hearts were slowly becoming whole again. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of Willow Creek Baptist Church, casting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. Jack sat with Lila, Ethan, and Mia in their Sunday best, the children fidgeting slightly as Pastor Joe stepped up to the pulpit. "Today, I want to talk about something special," Pastor Joe began, his warm voice filling the sanctuary. "About how God works through ordinary people to show extraordinary love." His eyes found Jack in the crowd. "Our brother Jack Walker opened his heart and home to 2 children in need. That's what faith in action looks like." Jack felt his cheeks warm as heads turned toward him. Ethan pressed closer to his side while Mia stared straight ahead, trying to look unbothered but failing to hide her small smile. After the service, people gathered in the fellowship hall. Mrs. Thompson, who taught 3rd grade, approached their little group. "Jack, I'd love to help Mia with her reading after school. I heard she's catching up fast." "That's mighty kind of you," Jack replied, touched by the offer. More church members came forward. Mr. Davis, the hardware store owner, promised school supplies for both children. The Quilting Circle ladies planned a food drive. Even gruff old Mr. Peterson offered to teach Ethan woodworking. "See what happens when you let people in?" Pastor Joe appeared at Jack's elbow, beaming. "This town's got a big heart. It just needed reminding." That afternoon, Jack sat at his kitchen table with Miss Darlene, working through paperwork for the Hearts and Heroes fundraiser they'd dreamed up together. The event would support both veteran services and foster care awareness. "The VFWs offered their grounds," Jack said, spreading out a rough sketch of the layout. "We'll have games for kids, food trucks, maybe even live music." Miss Darlene nodded approvingly. "It's perfect, Jack. Bringing the community together like this, it helps everyone understand these children aren't just case numbers. They're our neighbors." They worked through the details. Face painting stations, a dunk tank, Sheriff Tom had volunteered, and information booths about fostering. Local businesses began calling to sponsor activities. "You know," Miss Darlene said carefully, setting down her coffee cup, "you're doing an amazing job with Ethan and Mia. Have you considered making it permanent?" Jack's hand stilled over the papers. "You mean adoption?" "The way those kids look at you, they've found their home, Jack, and I think you've found healing too." She pulled out a thick folder. "I brought the preliminary paperwork just in case." Through the kitchen window, Jack could see the children playing in the backyard. Lila was pushing Mia on the tire swing while Ethan threw a stick for Buddy. Their laughter carried on the warm afternoon breeze. "They deserve stability," Miss Darlene added softly. "And you deserve happiness?" Jack thought about how quiet the house had been before, how empty. Now it overflowed with homework papers, crayon drawings, and midnight conversations about bad dreams. It wasn't always easy, but it felt right. Later that evening, Jack sat on the porch steps, looking through the freshly printed flyers for the Hearts and Heroes Festival. The design was simple but meaningful, a heart wrapped in a military ribbon, with the words, "Building Bridges, creating family underneath. The setting sun painted the sky in soft pinks and purples, just like Emily had loved. A gentle breeze rustled the papers in his hands, and for the first time in years, Jack felt truly at peace with the path ahead. "Dad," Lila called from inside. "Ethan wants you to read him a story." Jack gathered up the flyers, his heart full. The community's support had given him something he thought he'd lost forever: the courage to love again. The morning sun painted Willow Creek's town square in shades of gold. Red, white, and blue bunting draped the gazebo, and handmade hearts and heroes signs fluttered in the gentle breeze. Jack Walker stood near the entrance, checking his watch and adjusting the collar of his pressed blue shirt. "Dad, can we set up our stand now?" Lila tugged at his sleeve, her eyes bright with excitement. Behind her, Ethan and Mia waited with a stack of paper cups and a huge pitcher of fresh lemonade. "Sure thing, sweetie." Jack helped them arrange their table near the shade of an old oak tree. Mia's neat handwriting decorated their sign: "Sweet and sour lemonade, $1. All proceeds help foster kids." People started trickling into the square, carrying lawn chairs and picnic blankets. Miss Darlene arrived early, wearing a flowery dress and carrying a box of homemade cookies. "These are for your stand," she said, winking at the kids. Sheriff Tom and his deputies set up the sound system while Pastor Joe helped arrange tables for the potluck lunch. The Veterans Association members, wearing their caps and pins, gathered near the gazebo, exchanging stories and warm handshakes with Jack. 25 cents, Ethan called out suddenly, his voice carrying across the square. "We should also do quarter cups for little kids." Mia ruffled his hair. "That's really thoughtful, buddy." She adjusted their sign, and Jack felt his chest tighten with pride. These kids, who'd had so little, were thinking about making things easier for others. The square filled quickly. Ladies from the church auxiliary brought pies and casseroles. Mr. Peterson, the hardware store owner, donated supplies for future home repairs. Even Miss Porter, the stern case officer, showed up, her usual frown softening as she watched the children work their lemonade stand. $1, Lila said cheerfully to each customer. "It's for a good cause." Ethan carefully counted change while Mia poured perfect portions. They worked like a well-oiled machine, and townspeople lined up just to see them in action. Many dropped extra dollars in their collection jar, praising their entrepreneurial spirit. By noon, the square was packed. The local radio station played country gospel, and the smell of barbecue filled the air. Jack watched as Ethan gave free cups to younger kids, his stutter barely noticeable as he chatted with his new friends. Mayor Thompson approached the microphone. "Folks, if I could have your attention." The crowd quieted. "I'd like to invite Jack Walker to say a few words." Jack hadn't planned to speak. He walked to the gazebo, his boots heavy on the wooden steps. Looking out at the sea of familiar faces, he cleared his throat. "I'm not much for speeches," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "But I want to thank you all for coming today. 3 weeks ago, I was just a broken man trying to raise my daughter alone. Then God sent 2 amazing kids running into my life." He glanced at Ethan and Mia, who stood clutching Lila's hands. "They taught me something important. Sometimes the biggest battles aren't fought overseas. They're fought right here, in our hearts, in choosing to love again, to trust again." The crowd grew still, hanging on his words. "This town showed me what community means. You didn't just help these children, you helped heal an old soldier's heart. And for that, I'm grateful." Applause erupted. Several veterans wiped their eyes. Miss Darlene beamed from her seat, and even Miss Porter nodded approvingly. The mayor returned to the microphone. "Jack Walker, you've shown us what it means to be a hero at home. The town council has voted to match all donations today, dollar for dollar." More cheers filled the square. People lined up to contribute, sharing stories about how Jack's example had touched their lives. The donation box filled steadily, and the children's lemonade stand ran dry 3 times. Then, as if heaven itself wanted to join the celebration, soft raindrops began to fall. Instead of running for cover, Lila kicked off her shoes. "Come on!" she called to Ethan and Mia. They followed suit, splashing in the growing puddles. Other children joined them, their laughter mixing with the pitter-patter of rain. Parents watched, smiling, no one making a move to leave. Jack stood at the edge of the gazebo, watching his children dance. Mia's guard had dropped completely. She spun in circles, her dark hair sparkling with raindrops. Ethan jumped from puddle to puddle, his face lifted to the sky in pure joy. "Go on," Miss Darlene nudged him. "They're waiting for you." Something broke free in Jack's chest. He stepped into the rain, and 3 pairs of arms immediately wrapped around him. For the first time since Emily's passing, laughter bubbled up from deep within him. Real, uninhibited joy. They danced together in the warm summer rain, their bare feet splashing in puddles. Jack lifted Ethan onto his shoulders, spun Mia around, and caught Lila as she jumped into his arms. His laughter joined theirs, filling the square with its music. The rain fell softly, blessing their impromptu celebration. Townsfolk watched from beneath umbrellas and awnings, witnessing the transformation of a family. The old Jack Walker, the quiet, broken veteran, washed away in the cleansing rain, replaced by a man rediscovering the simple pleasure of playing with his children. The morning light filtered through Jack's kitchen window, catching dust motes in its golden beams. Ethan sat at the table, tongue poking out in concentration as he worked on his math homework. Mia helped Lila arrange fresh-cut flowers in a mason jar, daisies they'd picked from the backyard that morning. The scene was so perfect it made Jack's heart ache with gratitude. The sharp knock at the door shattered their peaceful morning. Miss Porter stood on the porch, her usually stern expression even more severe. Behind her, 2 officials from Child Services waited by their government car. "Mr. Walker, may we come in?" Her voice carried a weight that made Jack's stomach clench. He led them to the living room, where the children gathered instinctively close to him. Buddy, sensing the tension, pressed against Ethan's leg. "I'm afraid I have difficult news." Miss Porter opened her briefcase, pulling out official-looking documents. Raymond Cole, Ethan and Mia's biological father, was released from prison last week. He's filed for custody. The words hit Jack like a physical blow. Mia's face went pale, and Ethan's small hand gripped Jack's shirt. "That's impossible," Jack said, his voice hoarse. "They said there were no living relatives who could claim them." "Mr. Cole's rights were never officially terminated," Miss Porter explained. "By law, we have to consider his petition, and until the hearing." She paused, her eyes showing a flash of genuine sympathy. "The children need to be placed in temporary state care." "No!" Ethan's cry pierced the room. "You can't take us. Jack promised." Mia stood perfectly still, her face a mask of resignation that broke Jack's heart. She'd been through this before, too many times. "There has to be another way," Jack argued, rising to his feet. "I've filed for adoption. They're doing well here. They're happy." "I understand, Mr. Walker, but the law is clear. Mr. Cole has rights as their biological father, and until the court makes its decision." Miss Porter gestured to her colleagues. "We need to take them now." "Right now?" Lila's voice cracked. "They can't even pack their things?" Miss Porter softened slightly. "They can pack a small bag, but we need to leave within the hour." Jack knelt before Ethan, who was now sobbing openly. "You promised," the boy wailed. "You said they'd never take us again. You promised." Each word was like a knife in Jack's chest. "I know, buddy, I'm so sorry." His voice rough with emotion, he pulled Ethan close. "But I'm not giving up, you hear me? I'm going to fight for you both." Mia moved mechanically, helping Ethan pack while tears streamed silently down her face. Lila followed them around, adding small gifts to their bags. Her favorite hair ribbon for Mia, her lucky marble for Ethan. The hour passed too quickly. Outside, thunder rumbled ominously, and rain began to fall, just like the day Ethan had first run into Jack's yard. "Please," Jack tried one last time, addressing Miss Porter. "Let me at least appeal this. They shouldn't have to leave before we can present our case." "I'm sorry, Mr. Walker. The hearing is scheduled for next week. Until then, this is how it has to be." The children's small bags were loaded into the car. Ethan clung to Jack's neck, his whole body shaking with sobs. "Don't let them take us, please, please." Jack held him tight, his own tears falling now. "I love you, buddy. Both of you. Remember that. This isn't goodbye forever." Mia stepped forward last, her composure finally breaking. She threw her arms around Jack's waist. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing us what a real dad is like." The rain fell harder as the officials gently guided the children into the car. Lila pressed against Jack's side, crying openly as they watched their family being torn apart. Through the car's back window, Ethan's face appeared, his small hand pressed against the glass. Mia held him close, her own expression haunted and lost. Jack stood on his porch, the rain soaking through his clothes as the car pulled away. The sound of Ethan's last desperate cry, "Jack!" echoed in his ears, long after the taillights had disappeared into the gathering dusk. He remained there, motionless, as the storm raged around him. The empty house behind him felt like a mockery of the joy it had held just hours before. Lila's sobs had quieted to hiccups, but she wouldn't let go of his hand. The rain poured down, mixing with his tears as darkness settled over Willow Creek. The porch light cast a weak glow that couldn't reach the shadows now filling Jack's heart. He stood guard in the growing night, as if by sheer will he could bring them back, make this nightmare untrue. But the driveway remained empty, and the only sound was the steady drumming of rain on the roof. Nature's own lament for promises broken and hearts torn apart. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Jack Walker's backyard, where he stood hammering the same fence post he'd fixed 3 days ago. Each strike echoed through the empty yard, filling the void left by children's laughter. Inside the house, dishes from an untouched lunch sat cold on the kitchen counter. Lila watched from the kitchen window, her young face creased with worry. Her father hadn't eaten more than a few bites since Miss Porter took Ethan and Mia away. The house felt wrong without them, too quiet, too still, like a church after everyone had gone home. The hollow thud of the hammer continued as Jack worked, his movements mechanical. Sweat darkened his shirt despite the cool autumn air. He'd been at it for hours, though the fence didn't really need fixing. But staying busy kept his mind from wandering to places he couldn't bear to go. A flash of memory hit him. Emily sitting in her hospital bed, pale but smiling, her hand cool in his as she whispered, "Promise me you'll keep your heart open, Jack." He'd nodded, not knowing then how hard that promise would be to keep. The hammer slipped, striking his thumb. Jack barely flinched at the pain. "Dad?" Lila's voice cut through his thoughts. She stood beside him now, holding out a glass of water. "You should drink something." Jack took the glass, noticing how his hands trembled slightly. "Thanks, sweetheart. You missed lunch again," she said softly, her eyes full of understanding beyond her years. "And breakfast." He managed a weak smile. "Just not very hungry." Lila touched his arm, the gesture so like her mother it made his chest tighten. "Remember what Mom always said? God doesn't give us more than we can handle." The memory crashed over him like a wave. Emily had said those exact words when they lost their second baby, and again when the doctors diagnosed her cancer. She'd held on to her faith until the very end, while his had crumbled like autumn leaves. "Dad?" Lila continued, her voice gentle but firm. "Maybe God sent Ethan and Mia to us for a reason. Not just for them, but for us too." Jack stopped working, really looking at his daughter for the first time in days. She'd grown so much in the past few years, carrying pieces of Emily in her smile, her kindness, her unwavering faith. "When did you get so wise?" he asked, pulling her into a hug. "Mom," she answered simply. Another memory surfaced, Emily in their garden, pregnant with Lila, telling him that sometimes love means fighting for what matters, even when you're scared, even when it hurts. Jack put down his hammer. "I need to see Pastor Joe." 20 minutes later, he pulled into the church parking lot. The evening light painted the white steeple orange and gold. Pastor Joe was tending the small prayer garden, his weathered hands gentle among the flowers. "Jack," the pastor greeted him warmly, brushing dirt from his knees as he stood. "I've been praying for you." They sat on a wooden bench beneath an old oak tree. Jack's words came slowly at first. Then, in a rush, his fear of losing Ethan and Mia, of failing them like he felt he'd failed Emily, of not being strong enough to face another loss. Pastor Joe listened quietly, nodding occasionally. When Jack finished, the older man was silent for a long moment. "You know," he finally said, "faith isn't about never doubting or hurting. It's about taking one more step even when the path seems dark. Sometimes it means fighting hardest when hope feels farthest away." "But what if I fight and still lose them?" Jack's voice cracked. "Then you'll know you did everything you could," Pastor Joe replied. "But Jack, remember this. God's plans often look like chaos before they reveal themselves as blessing. Those children need someone willing to fight for them. The pastor's words stirred something in Jack's chest, a familiar sense of purpose he hadn't felt since his military days. Back then, he'd never hesitated to act when others needed help. Why should now be any different? The custody hearing, Jack said, straightening his shoulders. I need to be there, and I need witnesses, people who've seen how the kids have changed, how they've flourished here. Pastor Joe smiled. The whole town has seen it, Jack. You just say the word, and they'll stand with you. Driving home, Jack felt something he hadn't in days. Hope, small but steady, like a candle flame in the dark. He thought of Ethan's nightmares easing, of Mia's growing confidence, of Lila's joy in having siblings. They were worth fighting for. That night, after Lila went to bed, Jack knelt beside his own bed for the first time since Emily died. The position felt foreign, yet somehow right. His whispered words filled the darkness. If this is your plan, Lord, help me see it through. Dawn crept through the curtains of Jack Walker's bedroom as he stood before the mirror, carefully dragging the razor across his jaw. Steam from his hot shower still fogged the edges of the glass, but his reflection was clear enough. Tired eyes, a few more gray hairs than he remembered, and determination etched into every line of his face. He patted his face dry with a towel and reached for the shoe polish on his dresser. Sitting on the edge of his bed, he worked the black paste into his old service shoes with slow, deliberate strokes. The familiar ritual brought back memories of early mornings in the Gulf, preparing for inspection. But today's battle wouldn't be fought with weapons, it would be fought with words and heart. In the living room, spread across the coffee table, lay dozens of letters. Each envelope contained testimonials from townspeople who had witnessed the transformation in both Jack and the children during their time together. Mrs. Henderson from the grocery store wrote about how Ethan had stopped flinching when adults approached him. Mr. Peterson, Mia's math teacher, detailed her improving grades and growing confidence. Jack gathered the letters into a neat stack, his hands trembling slightly as he slipped them into his briefcase. The leather was worn but polished, like him, showing signs of wear but standing tall. "Dad?" Lila's voice came from the hallway. She stood in her pajamas, clutching something in her small hands. "I made this for you." She approached and held out a handmade pin fashioned from construction paper and glitter. In careful child's handwriting, it read, "Family is chosen," with hearts drawn around the edges. Jack's throat tightened as he pinned it to his jacket lapel. "It's perfect, sweetheart," he managed, pulling her into a hug. The morning progressed with a steady stream of visitors. Pastor Joe arrived first, his Bible tucked under one arm and a thermos of coffee in the other hand. "The congregation's been praying non-stop," he said, settling into Jack's kitchen chair. "We're all behind you." Sheriff Tom showed up next, still in uniform from his night shift. "Got my testimony all ready," he said, his gruff voice softer than usual. "Gonna tell 'em how those kids changed this whole town, for the better." Miss Darlene arrived with a stack of paperwork, documentation of every visit, every milestone, every sign of progress she'd witnessed. "The system isn't perfect," she admitted, spreading the papers across the dining room table. "But sometimes it gets it right. We're going to make sure this is one of those times." Throughout the morning, Jack practiced his speech in different corners of the house. In the kitchen, "Your Honor, I know I'm not perfect." In the bathroom, "Those children deserve stability." In the backyard, "I'm asking for a chance to." But each time he got to the part about love, about family, his voice would crack. Pastor Joe found him struggling through another attempt and placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Speak from your heart, Jack," the pastor advised. "God will give you the words when you need them." The neighbors came and went, each offering support in their own way. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door brought fresh-baked bread and promises to testify about the children's laughter brightening the whole street. Mr. Chen from the hardware store stopped by with photos of Ethan helping at his register, proving how the boy had grown more outgoing. By late afternoon, Jack had reviewed every document, practiced every word, and polished every detail he could think of. Still, anxiety gnawed at his stomach. He wandered from room to room, straightening pictures, adjusting cushions, trying to keep his hands busy. Lila watched him with knowing eyes. "Dad," she said finally, "can we pray?" They knelt together in the living room, joined by Pastor Joe, who had stayed to offer support. One by one, others who had come to help joined the circle. Miss Darlene, Sheriff Tom, neighbors who'd stopped by. Their voices merged in quiet supplication, asking for guidance, for wisdom, for the chance to keep their makeshift family whole. As evening settled over the house, the visitors gradually departed with promises to see him at the courthouse tomorrow. Jack found himself alone at the dining room table, the space around him too vast, too quiet. 6 chairs stood empty, 2 for him and Lila, 2 for Ethan and Mia, and 2 that had always remained vacant since Emily passed, as if waiting for something, or someone. His fingers traced the grain of the wooden table, remembering breakfast chaos and dinner prayers, homework sessions and art projects. The empty chairs seemed to whisper of possibilities, of future family meals, of growing up together, of healing old wounds with new love. The handmade pin on his lapel caught the last light of day, its glitter sparkling like hope. Jack touched it gently, feeling the slight roughness of dried glue under his fingertips. In that moment, surrounded by empty chairs but filled with purpose, he understood exactly what he was fighting for. The county courthouse loomed over Jack like a giant made of brick and judgment. Morning sunlight glinted off its weathered windows, but inside, the air felt thick with worry. Jack adjusted his tie for the 10th time as he walked through the heavy wooden doors, his footsteps echoing in the marble hallway. Lila squeezed his hand. "It's okay, Dad. You look perfect." The courtroom doors opened to reveal rows of wooden benches filled with familiar faces from Willow Creek. Pastor Joe nodded from the front row, and Sheriff Tom tipped his hat. But Jack's eyes fixed immediately on Ethan and Mia, sitting small and scared beside their caseworker, Miss Porter. Ethan wore a button-up shirt that seemed a size too big, his hair combed neatly to one side. Mia had on a blue dress Jack recognized from their time together, the one she'd worn to church. When they saw him, their faces lit up, but Miss Porter gently shook her head, reminding them to stay seated. "All rise," called the bailiff as Judge Martha Wilson entered, her black robe sweeping behind her. The Honorable Judge Wilson presiding in the matter of custodial rights for Ethan and Mia Cole. Jack's heart thumped against his ribs as Raymond Cole approached the witness stand. Gone was the hardened ex-convict from his mugshots. Today, Cole wore a pressed shirt and slacks, his hands steady as he placed them on the Bible. "Mr. Cole," his lawyer began, "please tell the court about your recent life changes." Raymond cleared his throat.
"Yes, sir. I've been sober for 8 months now. Got a steady job at Anderson's auto shop."
His voice cracked slightly. "I know I wasn't there before, but I'm different now. Those are my kids, and I want to make things right." Jack watched Mia's shoulders tense at her father's words. Ethan pressed closer to his sister, their hands linked tight. When it was Jack's turn to speak, he stood slowly, smoothing his jacket. The wooden stand felt like a mountain under his feet. "Mr. Walker," his attorney said, "please share with the court your experience caring for Ethan and Mia." Jack looked at the children, then spoke from his heart. "When Ethan came running to my gate that rainy night, he was terrified. Both children were." He paused, steadying his voice. "But over these past months, I've watched them bloom. Ethan's stutter has almost disappeared. His teachers say he's caught up to grade level in reading." He smiled gently at Mia. "And Mia, she's joining the school science club next semester. She helps cook dinner now, tells jokes at the table." Jack's eyes grew damp. "They're not just 2 kids who needed a home. They've become family, alongside my daughter Lila. They've helped heal my heart as much as I've tried to heal theirs." Miss Darlene testified next, her social worker's clipboard full of positive reports. "The improvement in both children has been remarkable. Ethan's nightmares have decreased significantly. Mia's showing trust in adults again. Mr. Walker has provided exactly the stable, loving environment they needed." One by one, community members took the stand. Mrs. Henderson from the grocery store described how Ethan no longer hid behind Jack when shopping. Pastor Joe spoke about the children's regular attendance at Sunday school, their growing confidence. Sheriff Tom detailed Jack's dedication to the Veterans and Families program. Even Miss Porter, who had initially doubted Jack, admitted, "While unconventional, this placement has shown exceptional results. The children are thriving." Judge Wilson listened carefully, her expression neutral as she made notes. When the last witness finished, she cleared her throat. "I've heard compelling testimony from both sides today. This is not a decision to be made lightly. I'll need time to review all evidence and reports before making my final ruling." She looked at both Jack and Raymond. "I understand this waiting period will be difficult, but the children's best interest must be my primary concern. We'll reconvene next week for my decision." The gavel's sharp crack echoed through the courtroom. Jack's stomach twisted as he watched Ethan's face fall. Before Miss Porter could usher them away, he crossed the room and knelt before both children. "Hey," he said softly, meeting their worried eyes. "I need you to remember something important." He gently squeezed their shoulders. "No matter what happens, you're never alone again." Mia's lip trembled. Ethan launched himself forward, wrapping his arms around Jack's neck. For a precious moment, Jack held them both, breathing in the scent of discount shampoo and hope, while the courthouse bustled around them. Miss Darlene touched his shoulder gently. "Time to go, kids." Jack watched them walk away, Ethan looking back over his shoulder until they disappeared through the heavy doors. Lila slipped her hand into his. "You did good, Dad," she whispered. The morning sun still streamed through the courthouse windows, but now it felt less like judgment and more like a prayer, one that would have to be enough until next week's answer. The late afternoon sun streamed through Jack's kitchen window, catching dust motes in its golden rays. He stood at the sink, washing dishes from lunch, when a familiar knock echoed through the house. Miss Darlene Hayes waited on his porch, her weathered face bearing an expression he couldn't quite read. "Jack," she said warmly as he opened the door. "May I come in?" He gestured her inside, noticing how she clutched her worn leather briefcase a little tighter than usual. His stomach tightened. He groaned to recognize when social workers had big news. "Coffee?" he offered, already reaching for a mug. "Please." She settled at his kitchen table, the same spot where she'd first discussed the children's case with him months ago. "I have something important to tell you, Jack. Something good." He paused mid-pour, the coffee pot hovering above her cup. "Good?" "Raymond Cole came to see me yesterday." She accepted the steaming mug with a gentle smile. "He's withdrawing his custody claim." The words hit Jack like a physical force. He sank into the chair across from her, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "What?" he said. Miss Darlene's eyes softened. "He said he saw what real love looked like in that courtroom. The way you spoke about Ethan and Mia, how the whole town showed up to support them," it opened his eyes. Jack stared at his own untouched coffee, watching ripples dance across its surface. "Just like that? He wants to meet with you," she continued. "Asked if you'd join him at Betty's diner tomorrow at 2. Said he has something he needs to tell you in person." The next day found Jack pulling into the diner's gravel parking lot, his truck's tires crunching over loose stones. Betty's hadn't changed in 20 years. Same faded blue awning, same neon open sign flickering in the window. Through the glass, he could see Raymond Cole already seated in a booth near the back. Jack's feet felt heavy as he walked inside. The bell above the door chimed, and a few regular customers nodded his way. Raymond looked up, his face lined with something that wasn't quite sadness, wasn't quite peace. "Mr. Walker," Raymond said, standing awkwardly. He extended a calloused hand. "Thank you for coming." Jack shook it briefly before sliding into the opposite bench. Betty herself brought over 2 cups of coffee, without being asked, tactfully retreating to give them privacy. Raymond stirred 3 sugars into his cup, the spoon clinking against ceramic. "I guess Miss Darlene told you?" "She did." Jack studied the man across from him, the same age as himself but worn down by harder years. "What I don't understand is why." Raymond's shoulders slumped. "When I got out of prison, I thought I could just pick up where I left off, like being their father was some kind of right." He laughed bitterly. "But sitting in that courtroom, watching you with them, I saw what they needed, what I never gave them." "They're good kids," Jack said quietly. "They are," Raymond's voice cracked. "Too good for what I put them through." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded paper, sliding it across the table. "Already signed. Just needs your signature and Miss Darlene's witness." Jack unfolded it carefully. "Voluntary. Termination of parental rights." His heart thundered in his chest. "Be the father I never could be," Raymond said, his eyes glistening. "Give them the home I should have. Please." Jack looked at the signature at the bottom of the page, the ink still fresh enough to smudge. In that scrawled name, he saw years of regret, of addiction, of choices that couldn't be unmade. But he also saw courage, the courage to choose love over pride. "I will," Jack promised softly. "And Raymond, They'll know you did this for them. That counts for something." Raymond nodded, wiping roughly at his eyes with the back of his hand. "Thank you." He stood up, leaving his coffee untouched. "There's one more thing." He pulled a small envelope from his pocket. "Pictures from when they were little, thought maybe they'd want them someday." Jack accepted the envelope, feeling its weight, not just in paper, but in memory and meaning. "Take care of yourself, Raymond." "You too, Mr. Walker, you too." Jack remained seated as Raymond walked toward the door. Through the window, he watched the other man cross the parking lot. Shoulders bent, but somehow lighter, Raymond paused at his truck, looked back once at the diner, then climbed in and drove away. In that moment, Jack understood that healing wasn't just about his own heart anymore. It was about broken pieces coming together in ways he never expected, about grace flowing both ways. He looked down at the signed paper and the envelope of photographs, these pieces of a story bigger than himself, and felt the weight of sacred trust settle over his shoulders. The county courthouse's old wooden benches creaked under the weight of what seemed like half of Willow Creek. Morning sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Jack Walker sat straight-backed in his Sunday best, hands clasped tightly in his lap to hide their trembling. Lila pressed close against his side, her small hand finding his. At the front of the courtroom, Judge Martha Wilson adjusted her reading glasses, studying the papers before her with careful attention. The silence stretched thin as a wire. Ethan and Mia sat with their caseworker in the front row, Ethan's legs swinging nervously while Mia kept her eyes fixed on her hands. In the matter of guardianship for Ethan and Mia Cole, Judge Wilson began, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. "I have reviewed all testimony, home study reports, and character references extensively." She paused, looking directly at Jack. "Mr. Walker, would you please stand?" Jack rose slowly, his military training automatically squaring his shoulders. The judge's expression softened as she continued. "In my 30 years on the bench, I've seen countless families torn apart and, occasionally, brought together. Today, I'm honored to be part of the latter." A smile touched her lips. "It is the decision of this court to grant full legal guardianship of Ethan and Mia Cole to Jack Walker, effective immediately." The courtroom erupted in applause. Pastor Joe's deep "Amen" rang out above the noise. Miss Darlene dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, and Sheriff Tom whistled through his fingers. But Jack barely registered any of it. His vision blurred as tears spilled freely down his cheeks. He heard twin cries of, "Jack!" and suddenly his arms were full of children. Ethan and Mia launching themselves at him with such force he had to step back to keep his balance. "We can stay?" Ethan's voice quavered, his small hands gripping Jack's suit jacket. "Forever? Forever, buddy." Jack managed through his tears, pulling both children closer. "You're home now, both of you." Mia, who had worked so hard to maintain her tough exterior these past months, broke down completely. "Thank you," she sobbed into his chest. "Thank you for wanting us." Lila squeezed into the embrace, completing their circle. "We're a real family now," she announced proudly, her own cheeks wet with happy tears. Judge Wilson let the moment stretch out, then gently tapped her gavel. "I'd like to say something more, if I may." The room quieted, though Jack kept his arms around all three children. "What I've witnessed in this case goes beyond the usual scope of our legal system. This town, Willow Creek, has shown extraordinary unity and compassion. You've demonstrated what community should truly mean." She smiled warmly. "Mr. Walker, you've not only provided a home for these children, you've inspired an entire town to remember its heart." More applause followed her words. Jack noticed familiar faces everywhere he looked. The librarian who'd helped Mia discover her love of reading, Ethan's teacher who'd stayed late to work on his confidence, the elderly couple next door who brought over dinner every Sunday. As people began to stand and gather their things, Miss Porter approached them. Jack remembered their first meeting. How stern and doubtful she'd been about his ability to care for two traumatized children. Now her usual professional mask had cracked, revealing genuine emotion. "You proved us all wrong, Mr. Walker," she said softly. "In the best way possible." She reached out to squeeze his arm. "These children couldn't have found a better father." The word father hit Jack like a physical force. He'd been so focused on protecting them, on fighting to keep them safe, that he hadn't fully processed what this moment really meant. He wasn't just their guardian, he was their dad now. The thought both terrified and thrilled him. Picture time, Miss Darlene called out, holding up her camera. The first official photo of the Walker family. They gathered together on the courthouse steps, squinting slightly in the bright spring sunshine. Jack knelt down so he was level with the children, one arm around Mia's shoulders, the other hand resting on Ethan's back. Lila stood between them, beaming with pride at her new siblings. Say family, Miss Darlene prompted. Family, they chorused, and the camera clicked. Outside on the courthouse lawn, well-wishers surrounded them with hugs and congratulations. But Jack found himself drawing his children, all three of them now, officially and forever, into a tight embrace. The morning sun broke through passing clouds above them, warming their faces and casting everything in golden light. Ethan's stutter, which had slowly improved over the months, was completely gone as he looked up at Jack with shining eyes. I love you, Dad. It was the first time he'd used the word, and Jack's heart felt like it might burst. Mia followed quickly, her voice thick with emotion. Love you too, Dad. Lila giggled joyfully. I told you guys he was the best dad ever. Jack held them close, these precious souls who had helped him find his way back to life and love. The sun continued to break through the clouds above, bathing them all. Golden afternoon light spilled through the farmhouse windows like liquid honey, casting warm shadows across freshly swept hardwood floors that gleamed with care. The rich scent of pot roast and cinnamon-spiced apple pie drifted from the kitchen on gentle currents, mingling with the sound of gospel music playing softly on Emily's old radio, the same one that had sat silent for months after her passing. It was the kind of Sunday that felt like a gift, wrapped in peace and tied with deep contentment, the sort of day that reminded a soul what blessings looked like when they wore everyday clothes. In the heart of the kitchen, flour dusted the worn wooden countertops like fresh snow after a gentle storm. Mason jars filled with sugar and brown sugar stood at attention beside measuring cups that had seen decades of Sunday dinners. Lila stood on her tiptoes, her golden hair catching the afternoon light as she peered into a large ceramic mixing bowl, while Mia carefully measured vanilla extract with the precision of someone who had learned that small details mattered. Their matching yellow aprons sewn by Emily years ago and pulled from storage just for this occasion were spotted with evidence of their afternoon baking adventures, telling stories of spilled cinnamon and stolen tastes of raw cookie dough. Like this? Mia asked, her voice soft but confident as she crimped the edge of the pie crust with careful, deliberate fingers. The golden dough yielded beneath her touch, forming perfect little waves that would brown to perfection in the oven. Perfect! Lila beamed, her face lighting up with the kind of joy that could chase away any shadow.
Mama's recipe said to make it look like waves on the ocean.
Yours is even prettier than mine, was the first time I tried. Mia's shoulders straightened at the praise, a small but genuine smile tugging at the corners of her lips, the same smile that had been so rare when she first arrived, guarded and suspicious of kindness. These moments in the kitchen had become their special ritual over the past few months, a sacred way of keeping Emily's memory alive while building something entirely new together. The recipe cards, stained with years of use and written in Emily's careful cursive, had become bridges between past and present, between grief and hope. Outside, beyond the screen door that let in the sweet evening breeze, the steady rhythm of hammering echoed across the sprawling yard where wildflowers grew in happy chaos. Jack and Ethan worked side by side at the wooden fence, the very same fence where their extraordinary story had begun on that rain-soaked evening so many months ago. Jack watched with quiet pride as Ethan's small hands gripped the hammer with growing confidence, his pink tongue poking out in fierce concentration as he drove another nail home with determined precision. "Good job, buddy," Jack said, his weathered hand ruffling Ethan's sandy hair that had grown longer and healthier under steady meals and peaceful sleep. "You're getting real strong with that hammer. Before long, you'll be teaching me a thing or two about fence repair." Ethan grinned up at him, his blue eyes sparkling with pride, his stutter barely noticeable now when he spoke with the easy comfort of a child who knew he was safe and loved. "Is this the last part we gotta fix, Jack?" "Sure is." Jack stepped back, wiping his hands on an old rag as he surveyed their afternoon's work with satisfaction. The fence stood straight and true, each post secure and each board level a far cry from the broken, weather-beaten barrier it had been just hours before. Like everything else in his life these days, it had needed patience, care, and willing hands to make it whole again. The symbolism wasn't lost on him as he watched Ethan carefully place the hammer in the toolbox with the reverence of someone who understood the value of taking care of what mattered. The late afternoon sun painted everything in honey-gold tones as they gathered their tools, the air filled with the sweet perfume of honeysuckle climbing the newly repaired fence. Jack's gaze drifted naturally to the spot where Ethan had first burst through the old gate, terrified and alone, his small voice breaking as he begged for help finding his sister. Now that same boy walked tall beside him, chattering excitedly about the family of robins building a nest in the ancient oak tree, pointing out every detail with the enthusiasm of someone who had learned that the world could be beautiful when viewed through eyes that weren't clouded by fear. Inside the farmhouse, the kitchen bustled with the comfortable chaos of dinner preparations. Mia moved with newfound confidence through the space that had become truly hers, setting the large dining table with careful precision while humming along to the radio. Her movements were sure and practiced now, no longer the hesitant gestures of someone afraid to make a mistake. Meanwhile, Lila arranged wildflowers in the center of the table, purple clover, yellow buttercups, and white daisies they'd picked that morning after church while the dew still sparkled on the grass. The sound of their gentle bickering over the proper placement of forks and whether the napkins should be folded in triangles or rectangles brought a deep, satisfying smile to Jack's weathered face. "Wash up for dinner, you two," he called to the girls, his voice carrying the easy authority of a father who knew his words would be cheerfully obeyed. He guided Ethan toward the kitchen sink, turning on the warm water that washed away dirt and sawdust from their afternoon's work. But Jack's hand still held the memory of every fence post they'd mended together, every tear they'd wiped away during those first difficult weeks, every bedtime story they'd shared in the soft glow of the hallway nightlight. The house had transformed in subtle but profound ways over the months since that life-changing evening. Crayon drawings decorated the refrigerator door in a rainbow of colors, depicting stick-figure families under smiling suns and houses with crooked chimneys that somehow looked more real than any architectural blueprint. Colorful backpacks hung by the front entrance like faithful sentinels, ready for school adventures and weekend explorations. Toys scattered across the living room, building blocks, dolls, picture books, and puzzles told the ongoing story of life renewed and childhood reclaimed. Photos both old and new lined the walls in mismatched frames, creating a gallery of love that spanned decades. Emily's gentle smile, watching over them all, like a guardian angel, blessing this unexpected path their lives had taken with her eternal approval. As they settled around the dining table that had once felt too large for just Jack and Lila, the rich aroma of pot roast filled the air with promises of comfort and nourishment. Sunshine streamed through windows that sparkled from Mia's dedicated cleaning earlier that day, casting patterns of light and shadow across the worn wooden table that had witnessed so many family gatherings over the years. Jack looked at each precious face gathered around him. Lila, her mother's infinite kindness shining in her bright eyes and gentle smile. Mia, finally allowing herself to truly belong, her defenses lowered enough to laugh freely and speak her mind. Ethan, no longer jumping at sudden movements or flinching at raised voices, his small frame relaxed and secure in the knowledge that he was home. Their hands joined naturally around the table, forming an unbroken circle of connection that seemed to pulse with shared love and gratitude. Jack's throat tightened with emotion as he bowed his head, overwhelmed by the magnitude of grace that had brought them all together. The words of thanksgiving came easily now, rising from a heart that had learned to trust in divine providence again after so many dark months of doubt and despair. "Lord," he began, his voice steady and warm despite the tears that threatened to fall, "for family, found and chosen, for second chances and new beginnings, for the miracle of love that heals all wounds, we thank you." He felt Ethan's small hand squeeze his own with surprising strength, and in that simple gesture lay all the healing that love had brought to their broken pieces. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of loss, a home where hope dwelled permanently, and hearts mended one day at a time, where laughter echoed through rooms that had once known only silence and sorrow. The late afternoon sun painted stripes of liquid gold across their joined hands, across the feast before them that represented hours of shared labor and love, across the faces of his children, all of his children, blood-born and heart-chosen alike. In the background, the radio played softly, a familiar hymn about amazing grace filling the quiet spaces between their breaths and binding them together in a moment that would live forever in their collective memory. Outside, Buddy barked playfully at a butterfly dancing among the flowers, his tail wagging with the pure joy of a creature who understood instinctively that all was right with the world. The golden retriever had become the silent guardian of their happiness, sensing their emotions with uncanny accuracy and offering comfort with his warm presence whenever shadows of the past threatened to intrude on their peace. As Jack lifted his eyes to meet those of his family, he saw reflected back to him the same wonder and gratitude that filled his own heart. This was what redemption looked like. He realized not a single moment of dramatic transformation, but 1,000 small moments of choosing love over fear, hope over despair, togetherness over isolation. Emily would have loved this scene, would have insisted on taking photographs to capture the light in everyone's eyes, would have declared it the most beautiful thing she had ever witnessed. And in his heart, Jack knew she was here with them still, her love woven into the very fabric of their newfound happiness, her blessing resting gently on the family she had always dreamed he would find again. The summer evening painted the sky in magnificent shades of deep rose and burnished gold, as Jack Walker guided his precious family through the bustling heart of the Willow Creek Town Fair. Hundreds of twinkling white lights crisscrossed overhead like fallen stars, casting a warm, magical glow on the happy faces of neighbors and friends below. The rich scent of spun cotton candy and buttery grilled corn wafted through the humid Tennessee air, mixing with the cheerful sounds of fiddles and guitars from the wooden bandstand where the local bluegrass band played their hearts out. "Look, Dad." Lila tugged insistently at Jack's cotton sleeve, her bright eyes sparkling with excitement as she pointed toward the colorful ring toss booth decorated with red, white, and blue bunting. "Can we try that one? Please? I've been practicing my aim all week." Ethan clutched Jack's other hand with both of his small ones, his soft brown eyes wide with pure wonder at the carnival games, stretching endlessly before them, like a child's dream come to life. The bright flashing lights from the game booths reflected in his glasses, and Jack noticed how the boy's shoulders had relaxed completely, no longer hunched with fear or uncertainty. Mia walked gracefully alongside them, more at peace and relaxed than Jack had ever seen her in all these months together. A genuine smile played softly on her lips as she watched Lila's enthusiastic chatter, and she even laughed when a toddler wearing overalls waved at her from his father's shoulders. "Jack Walker." Sheriff Tom's booming, jovial voice carried clearly over the cheerful crowd. He approached with purposeful strides, his wife Sarah at his side, both of them beaming with genuine warmth and pride. "These must be the famous kids I keep hearing so much about around town." Jack nodded slowly, deep pride warming his chest like sunshine after a long winter. "You already know my Lila, of course, and these beautiful souls are Mia and Ethan. Your daddy's quite the hero around these parts," Sarah said gently, kneeling down gracefully to meet Ethan's curious eyes at his own level. The boy pressed closer to Jack's strong leg but managed a shy, sweet smile that made Sarah's heart melt completely. As they made their unhurried way through the bustling fair, weaving between families and groups of teenagers, more townspeople stopped to greet them with genuine affection. Miss Darlene waved enthusiastically from behind the church-bake sale booth, her kind face glowing with motherly pride. Pastor Joe paused his animated conversation with the mayor to shake Jack's hand firmly, his eyes twinkling with the special joy that comes from watching God's plan unfold. Each warm interaction carried the same unspoken message that filled Jack's heart to overflowing. "You did good, Jack. You brought these precious children home where they belong." "Can I try the ball throw?" Ethan asked quietly, his voice gaining confidence as he pointed toward the game where other children were attempting to knock down pyramid-stacked milk bottles with well-worn baseballs. "Of course, buddy." Jack led them carefully to the booth, reaching into his wallet to pay for 3 tries, while the operator, a friendly teenager with a genuine smile, handed Ethan 3 scuffed baseballs. Jack watched with patient love as Ethan's first throw fell disappointingly short of the target, rolling harmlessly across the wooden counter. His second went wide to the right, missing completely. "Here, son." Jack knelt beside him on one knee, gently adjusting Ethan's small grip on the ball with the same careful attention he'd once used to teach wounded soldiers. "Just like we've been practicing throwing in our backyard after dinner, remember? Nice and steady, breathe out slow." Ethan's pink tongue poked out slightly in fierce concentration, just like Lila's did when she worked on her homework. He drew back his thin arm with careful deliberation and released the ball with perfect form that made Jack's chest swell with fatherly pride. The baseball struck the bottles dead center with a satisfying crash, sending them clattering loudly to the ground in a shower of victory. "You did it, Ethan!" Mia cheered with pure sisterly joy, jumping up and down while her dark hair bounced around her shoulders. Lila clapped excitedly beside her, both girls beaming as if their little brother had just won the World Series. The teenage booth operator grinned widely and handed Ethan a small silver medal attached to a bright blue ribbon. "Here you go, champ. That was some real nice throwing." Ethan stared at the shiny medal for a long, thoughtful moment, turning it over in his small hands as if it were made of pure gold. Then he slowly turned to face Jack, his young face serious and filled with an emotion far beyond his 7 years. His small fingers trembled slightly as he held the precious medal out toward his father. "This is for you, Dad," he said, his voice soft but absolutely sure and steady. "For saving us, for making us a real family." The entire bustling world seemed to pause and hold its breath. Jack felt warm tears spring immediately to his eyes as he knelt carefully in front of his son. Yes, his son now, in every way that truly mattered in this life. Ethan's upturned face held such pure, unconditional love and complete trust that Jack's battle-scarred heart threatened to burst wide open with overwhelming gratitude. "Come here, my brave boy," Jack whispered, his voice thick with emotion as he pulled Ethan into the tightest, most loving hug of his entire life. He felt Mia and Lila immediately join their embrace without hesitation, their family circle finally complete and unbreakable. In that perfect moment, surrounded by the sounds of laughter and music, Jack felt Emily's presence as clearly as if she were standing right beside them, blessing this beautiful new chapter of their lives. As purple darkness fell gently over the fairgrounds, the entire area transformed into a breathtaking wonderland of colored lights and joyful anticipation. Families spread blankets across the grassy hill overlooking the fair, everyone gathering eagerly for the grand fireworks display that would cap off this perfect evening. Jack spread out their well-worn plaid blanket, the same one Emily had used for picnics years ago, and his children settled around him like precious gifts. Ethan curled trustingly on his lap, while Mia and Lila pressed close and warm against his sides. The first magnificent explosion lit up the entire sky in a spectacular shower of golden sparks that reflected in hundreds of upturned faces. Ethan jumped slightly at the thunderous boom, but Jack's steady, protective arms held him completely secure. "It's okay, buddy," he murmured against the boy's soft hair. "I've got you safe. I'll always have you safe." More brilliant fireworks followed in rapid succession, painting the velvet night in cascades of red, blue, silver, and green. As Jack watched his children's wonder-filled faces illuminated by each burst of color, a gentle summer breeze stirred the warm air around them. It carried the faintest, most precious hint of Emily's favorite lavender perfume, and Jack smiled through his grateful tears. "We made it, Em," he whispered softly to the star-filled heavens above. "We really made it through to the other side." Later that peaceful night, Jack carried a sleeping Ethan from the car in his strong arms, while Mia helped guide an equally drowsy Lila up the porch steps and inside their cozy home. He tucked each precious child into their beds with infinite tender care, pulling covers up to chins and dropping gentle kisses on foreheads. As he moved through the familiar bedtime routine, he remembered with crystal clarity how empty and echoing these same rooms had felt just a few short months ago. Back downstairs in the quiet house, Jack stepped out onto the wooden porch where he'd first met a terrified little boy in the pouring rain. The night was crystal clear and perfectly still, with countless stars twinkling like diamonds scattered across black velvet. From inside the house came the soft, precious sounds of his sleeping family, peaceful breathing, the occasional gentle creak of a settling bed, Buddy's contented snoring from his spot at the foot of Ethan's bed. All the beautiful, ordinary noises of a home truly filled with unconditional love. He fingered the small silver medal in his shirt pocket, thinking deeply about the incredible journey that had brought them all to this moment of perfect peace. The broken, haunted veteran who couldn't sleep through a single night without nightmares. The frightened little boy who had appeared at his gate in the driving rain, desperate for someone to believe him. The fiercely protective sister who had slowly learned to trust again after years of disappointment. His precious Lila, who had opened her generous heart wide to make room for even more love than she'd thought possible. A slow, genuine smile spread across Jack's weathered face as he looked up at the infinite, star-filled sky that stretched endlessly above their little corner of Tennessee. The same stars that had watched over him during those dark nights overseas, the same ones that had shone down on Emily during her final days, now blessed this beautiful new beginning. "They didn't just need saving," he whispered into the gentle night air, his words carrying up toward heaven on the summer breeze.
"I did too. We all did."
The porch light flickered softly in the peaceful darkness, a steady, unwavering beacon of faith, family, and the endless, miraculous power of love to heal even the deepest wounds and create something beautiful from the broken pieces of life. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Walker, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.